Okay, we are now live on YouTube. Eileen, you're on mute.
Right, start again. Good afternoon and welcome back to East Devon District Council's Virtual Planning Committee on the 15th of July 2020. I'm your chairman, Councillor Eileen Wragg. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. We will now start this afternoon's meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again.
Councillor Tim Bloxham.
Present.
Councillor Colin Brown.
Present.
Councillor Sarah Chamberlain.
Present.
Councillor Ollie Davey.
Present.
Councillor Bruce Desaran.
Present.
Councillor Steve Gazzard.
Present.
Councillor Mike Howell.
Present.
Councillor David Key.
Present.
Councillor Kathy McLaughlin.
Present.
Councillor Jeff Pook.
Present.
Councillor Jeff Pratt.
Present.
Councillor Phil Skinner.
Present.
Councillor Tony Woodward.
Present.
And Councillor Eileen Wragg.
Present.
Just to confirm your quorum, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, are there any declarations of interest for this afternoon's applications, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I have one.
I think Amanda's going to read out the names. No? Yeah?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm going to read out the names. So, Councillor Bloxham.
None, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, ward member for Dunkerswell and Otterhead.
And what application is that then?
That's the second one up this afternoon. For Turnberry.
Councillor Chamberlain.
No declarations.
Councillor Davey.
No declarations.
Councillor Desaran.
No declarations, thank you.
Councillor Gazzard.
None, thank you.
Councillor Howell.
None that I know of.
Councillor Key.
Ward member for application 190855.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
None.
Councillor Pook.
Yes, application 192445. I've worked with those applicants before, but I have no pecuniary interest in the not the applicant, the architect or the site. So they're just acquaintances.
Did you say you had a pecuniary interest?
I have no pecuniary interest with
No,
either the architect or the site.
But you've worked with the applicant?
Yes, they're equivalent of acquaintances, and therefore it's a personal declaration.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Pratt.
None.
Councillor Skinner.
Yes, I have a declaration of personal interest on planning application number 20/0270 MFUL Major at Woodbury and Limpstone for Greendale Business Park. It's a personal interest. The Carters are very good friends of mine. So I will be declaring my interest, and I think I'm leaving the meeting. I don't know what you do, but I'm leaving the meeting, being put on hold or put in the bin or whatever you call it. And
You're going to be put in the virtual lobby. Yes.
I'm going to be put in the virtual lobby by somebody. I'm sure to be let out at some point.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Woodward.
None.
And Councillor Wragg.
None.
Okay, thank you all.
Right, welcome to Mr. Kirkness, who is registered to speak on application number 200270 MFUL, Unit 50, Greendale Business Park, Woodbury Salterton. Before I invite you to speak, Mr. Kirkness, we'll hear the presentation from the development manager, Chris Rose. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so yes, this relates to Unit 50, as it's called, at Greendale Business Park, and it's an application for an extension to a warehouse, a turning head, footpath link, some regrading, and an emergency link. So you can see the site that it relates to here. So you've got the access off the A3052, comes in along existing access road, and then we've got a warehouse building here at the moment used for storage and distribution, and their proposal is to extend that and to carry out works in this area here. If I just move on, so this is the existing layout. What I should point out is the consented boundary for Greendale runs pretty much along this boundary here. So most of the works that are proposed as part of this application fall outside of the previously consented area for Greendale. And this is the proposed layout plan. So you can see the extension to the building is proposed there. We get an extension of the access road with a turning head for HGV vehicles. You've got an emergency route that links through to link up the road up here with this proposed road and turning head. And then we've got a footpath that goes down the slope to joins up with the existing footpath that links up to the farm shop and then down to the road near Woodbury Salterton. And there are some landscaping proposed around the edge of the site as well. So you can see here the extension to the employment building, say in warehouse use, just a simple continuation of the design and materials of the existing building that's there. And you'll see from the report that the applicant is saying that this will create an extra 10 jobs for the business. So going on to the photos, this is a view from the site looking down the existing bank to the footpath. So this is where the footpath will be put in as part of the proposal. And then this is the view looking down from the footpath back up to the site. And this slope is where the new footpath will be put in. And this is up on the site at the moment. So there's already been hard surfacing works that's been carried out. That's the building that's proposed to be extended. So you can see the relation of the site to the surroundings, and you can see that there's already landscaping to the boundary of this site. So in terms of the principle of development here, the application is before you because it's a departure from the local plan. Strategy 7 requires development in the countryside, which this technically is, to be supported by a local plan or a neighbourhood plan, and there is no support for the extension of Greendale Business Park in the local plan, and there's no relevant neighbourhood plan. In fact, the local plan policy E7 specifically states that there should be no extension to Greendale Business Park and that policy doesn't apply. And then we've got the villages plan, and there's in there that defines the boundary for Greendale. And again, the policy in there, VP04, explains that there's no support for the extension to Greendale Business Park. But despite that, we're required to consider whether there are any other material considerations that would weigh in favour of the proposal to outweigh the lack of planning policy support. And you'll see in the report that there's a number of these material considerations mentioned. The first one being that the extension to businesses is supported by the NPPF generally, very much supporting the growth of businesses and rural businesses. The proposal, the applicant said, will create 10 more local jobs, which obviously weighs in favour of the proposal. There's the benefit to the HGV vehicles and noise from including this turning head at the end of this access road. There's also arguably a link of this emergency access through between the two sites in case of a fire or emergency. There's the benefit of this public footpath that will link this part of the site in with that wider public footpath. And also there's the lack of any wider landscape harm. So I showed you the photo of the bottom of this footpath up towards the site and the landscape in there already. And certainly from more distant views, you only really view this site against the backfall of the existing business park. So there's no wider landscape harm either. And in terms of the ensuring there's no further detrimental impact on neighbours, you'll see there's a number of conditions that are proposed in terms of restricting delivery hours, preventing reversing alarms, submission of a lighting scheme and submission of a landscaping scheme. So balancing up those material considerations and benefits of the proposal against the lack of policy support, officers are recommending approval of the application on the basis they feel that those benefits afforded for the scheme and the lack of any other harm mean that the proposal can be approved. So it's recommended for approval for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. Kirkness, are you ready to speak?
I am indeed. Thank you very much, Chair.
Right, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So as highlighted by Chris previously, but just drawing on some of those key messages on the application, as highlighted, this is an extension to an existing unit for an existing business and supporting their expansion within the business park. We hope it will generate more than 10 new jobs, which was as expected in the previous application for Westex storage on the existing Unit 50, where we thought that it would generate an additional 10 jobs on that occasion, and in fact it generated 19 jobs. So we hope to enhance the employment provision beyond the comments made. In terms of the potential visual impact of the building, again touched on by Chris, but we do believe that the proposed building will in fact provide something of a visual screen from the west, as it will provide a uniform finish to screen a proportion of this remaining part of the business park, albeit that the overall visibility is very limited, as highlighted by Chris and in Lynn's report, due to the existing tree cover. It's also likely to provide a sound barrier from the west, we believe, which was one of the points that was raised during the discussions over the application. And we've deliberately designed the building with sensitive wall and roof materials to sit in the landscape sensitively. And therefore, we're very comfortable with the proposed conditions regarding finishes and ensuring that the materials are in keeping with the current building and suitable within the landscape. Furthermore, and as highlighted, with some further tree planting along the boundary of the proposed building, we hope that in the long term there'll be a good level of screening from this building and from this part of the business park. We also have no objection to the suggestion of providing concrete or tarmac for the proposed turning head, as that was highlighted as a potential concern regarding the generation of dust. So we're fully supportive of that suggestion. And following our previous engagement with Councillor Young, we confirm that we also have no objection to any of the other conditions and recognise that these are designed to mitigate any potential noise and landscape disturbance. So we're fully supportive of those suggestions. Overall, we feel the building itself and the proposed planting will provide much of the mitigation that's required. However, if there is a need to consider further sound barriers in due course, as has also been suggested, then we're very happy to pick that discussion up at a later date. So from a policy perspective, the key policies have already been highlighted. We do feel that the proposal is in line with sustainable development strategy and also sort of balanced communities. Time's up, sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkness. And now we have Councillor Young.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you to the planning team for providing us with a well-argued report. Pointing that the developer has developed over the boundary and into the open countryside. However, this was done a few years ago, and this application area is simply making good the damage that had been done earlier. However, the remedial work to remove the landfill would, I believe, create too much damage to the existing tree scheme, which, like all the trees in this area, are covered by substantial tree protection orders. I was very pleased that representatives of the developers attended a parish council meeting just prior to lockdown, and where we explained, where they explained the proposals, listened to our perspectives on suggestions and proposed changes. And these are included within the report as proposed conditions, which I understand are fully agreed by the developer. It's a pity that this is partly retrospective, but the extra planting and screening will help blend the raw industrial landscape into the open countryside. This site needs to comply to the local plan and the village's plan. And although this area is included in further proposed development within the yet to be decided GESP, it needs to be pointed out that the GESP proposals are simply just that, proposals. However, on this occasion, I support the recommendation to approve to allow the work to be completed and the landscaping can proceed to provide the extra screening proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Right. I see two blue hands. David Key. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, this is going to enable sort of extra jobs to come in. What I was pleased to see is an actual fact that there is going to be a turning circle. So you're not going to be hearing the buzzing on the back of the lorries when they're actually turning, because the circle is big enough to actually make a complete turn rather than backwards and forwards and making the buzzing noise that for public. So I can't see any problem in this. I've read through the recommendations and the conditions, and I'd like to put forward that this application is approved. Thank you.
Happy to second that proposal.
Thank you. That's Councillor Howe, is it?
Councillor De Sarum.
Oh, De Sarum. Couldn't see you on the screen. Okay, so that's been proposed and seconded. Got Councillor De Sarum next.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's very positive that they've got the sound barrier, the sensitive wall, and the roof materials, and they've made good the previous damage, as the ward member has said, and the ward member also said it would help blend the rural design. I appreciate that the ward member had initial concerns, and I think everyone had concerns about this, but clearly the applicant has done what they can within the planning regulations to actually provide a very sensitive project for future people, which, as they said, will generate jobs, which is very much needed. So thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in support of this. I'm obviously pleased to see jobs being generated, and I was going to ask if there was any evidence for this. I'm quite pleased that the applicant has stated that a previous extension actually generated more jobs than expected, so I'm heartened by that. And I welcome the landscaping and also the possibilities, at least for sustainable travel to the site. I welcome the addition of the extra footpath, and I think Councillor Young has also referred to it being a cycle access, so there's definite possibilities for sustainable means of travel there as well, so I welcome those aspects of it.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Pratt.
Yes, I support the recommendations, and I note the proposals have conditions which the applicant has agreed with the planning officers. So I'm all in favour of this one and support it.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, thank you. I also support this application for a couple of reasons, and that is also the jobs and the link with the footpath for walkers, cyclists, and the use of being able to go through to the farm shop and things, and also connecting through to other areas for people walking and cycling. So I also support this, and also with the green infrastructure being put in, I support it.
Thank you. There are no further blue hands raised. So we have a proposal from Councillor Key to approve this application, seconded by Councillor De Sarum. Can we take a vote, please?
Shirley, could you just give the overall recommendation before we go to the vote, please?
Yep.
Yes. Members, as the chair has just said, that Councillor Key and Councillor Pratt have proposed and seconded. The recommendation is as per the officer's recommendation in the report. That is to approve subject to the conditions as listed in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
I support as per officer's recommendation approval.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Approval as per officer's recommendation.
Councillor Chamberlain.
I support the application as per the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Davey.
I support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support recommendation to approve.
Councillor Gazzard.
Approve.
Councillor Howe.
Approve.
Councillor Key.
Approve with conditions.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Approve.
Councillor Pook.
Support recommendation to approve.
Councillor Pratt.
Support recommendation to approve with conditions as set out.
Councillor Skinner.
He's not here.
Oh, of course, sorry. Apologies. Councillor Woodward.
I support the officer's recommendation.
And Councillor Ragg.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Thank you. So that's unanimous to approve with conditions as stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, application number 190855, full building adjacent Turbury Dunkerswell. I'd like to welcome Mr. Preston, who's registered to speak. And before I invite you to speak, Mr. Preston, we'll hear the presentation from Mr. Rowe, Development Manager.
Excuse me, Chair. Is Councillor Skinner back in the room?
I most certainly am.
Jolly good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to a site in Dunkerswell. You can see on the screen here, fairly isolated site up here next to existing employment buildings, and which are here, and the applications for a change of use of a large agricultural building. It's about 850 square meters to commercial buildings, so B uses. There are some elevational changes and some changes to the parking proposed, and the application's here because it's contrary to view of the ward member. And this is a countryside location, as the photos will show, and it's in the AONB. So this is the proposed layout for the site. So the building is there at the moment. It's going to be clad, and then there's gravel. This is the existing layout. Sorry, there's gravel to the front, scrubland to the rear, and then this access lane. And the proposal, you can see, will have more parking at the back of the site, parking to the front, some landscaping to the boundaries, and utilise the existing access with some improvements to the appearance of the building, but not increasing its size. And you can see that it'll be split into 2 units. So this is the agricultural building at the moment. The storage containers would go as part of the proposal, and you can see the access into the site there. Looking back towards the building, access road down the side. So the area at the front would become parking, and the area at the rear would become parking for the units as well. So you can see access down there to the rear of the building. That's the view from the gate. There is some screening of the site on to the left of the access as you drive in. So that's this here, and then this is looking back from the road. So you can see how prominent the site is. So there is a policy in the local plan, policy D8, that allows agricultural uses to go to other uses. And the applicant have said as part of this application that they have recently lost or sold off 100 acres of land. So therefore, because of that, they no longer need this building for agricultural use. And I don't have any evidence to rebut that. And we've also got the site we've got policy support from policy E4 of the local plan with rural diversification. So it supports agricultural enterprises where they need to diversify and have spare buildings to branch out into other employment businesses. So the proposal would support the policy would support that application. There's also a relevant policy in the Dunkerswell neighbourhood plan. There's a policy in there, LE3, which relates to conversions of agricultural buildings. That says that when considering proposals for the conversion of agricultural buildings for business or business related uses, regard will be had to the character of the area, highway safety, etc. So that policy in principle is supporting the conversion of agricultural buildings to businesses. And also we have the support in the NPPF, which supports job creation and businesses in rural areas, particularly where it's utilised in existing buildings. In addition to that, you'll see in the report there's mention of a fallback position. So under the government's recently introduced prior approval process, the applicant could convert 500 square metres of the 850 to employment uses under that prior approval process. We would be limited in what we can consider as part of that application. We wouldn't be able to assess the locational criteria or the loss of the agricultural use. We would only be able to consider limited numbers on contamination and flood risk, which it would satisfy. And also from that fallback, we wouldn't be able to add conditions to an application. So this application allows us to put those conditions on if members were to grant consent. So given that local plan policy support, neighbourhood plan policy support by the NPPF and the fallback, it's considered that the principle of development is acceptable. In terms of the visual impact, there's no extensions proposed to the building. It's considered that the proposal will tidy up the site, and there's no objection from the AONB team or the landscaping officer. And the landscaping officer is happy with the landscaping works that are proposed to the boundary of the site, which are to be conditioned. There's no objection on highway safety grounds. The access is suitable and there's adequate parking proposed. And in terms of protecting the amenity of the closest house, which is on the other side of the boundary there, there's conditions that are proposed limiting the hours of delivery, the hours of use and noise in terms of hard standing. So in light of all of that, the policy supports the fallback position and the lack of other harm, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. Preston, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. My name's Andrew Preston. I'm a planning consultant with Greenslade Taylor Hunt, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Rex Diamond. Chairman, this building has now become redundant for agriculture, with Mr. Diamond having changed his farming policy and no longer needing a building in this off-lying location. Rather than let it stand empty, he's applied for permission to change to commercial use. The location is suitable in principle, being directly adjacent to a well-established commercial site. East Devon Local Plan Policies D8 and E4 and Policy LE3 of the Dunkerswell Neighbourhood Plan support the conversion of rural buildings for employment use. At the national level, the NPPF places significant weight on the need to support economic growth, particularly in rural areas through conversion of existing buildings. This proposal is to reuse the building for light industrial and storage use. Minimal changes are needed to the building itself. The existing yard areas to north and south will be retained for parking, and detailed landscaping proposals include the provision of a Devon hedge bank along the access around the building and the parking area. Additional tree planting is proposed between the building and the highway and within the Devon Bank. Chairman, we've worked closely with your planning and landscape officers to agree these details, and your officer report confirms that the development will conserve the relative tranquility, scenic and landscape qualities of the Blackdown Hills AONB. The applicant has also addressed potential issues of impact on the amenity of nearby residents. The proposed uses are for B1 light industrial use, which by definition can be carried on within a residential area without harm, and for B8 storage. The applicant is happy to accept the conditions recommended by your environmental health team, which your officer notes will ensure that any additional noise and disturbance can be mitigated to an acceptable level. As the officer has noted, the applicant has a fallback position where up to 500 square metre floor area may change its use under permitted development rights. The applicant would prefer, however, to submit a comprehensive application for the whole site, which also offers the council the opportunity to control issues such as noise and landscaping. German planning policies encourage sustainable commercial development, which will create employment and strengthen the rural economy. This is all the more important under the current pandemic and the threat of impending recession. The applicant has identified a tenant for the whole building who is ready, willing and able to make effective use of this otherwise redundant building for employment. Your officer has accepted that this can be achieved without harmful impact on the landscape, highway, neighbouring amenity or otherwise. And I therefore respectfully ask you to please support your officer and grant permission this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Preston. Now we go to the ward members. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. It depends on how you interpret the Duncansville neighbourhood plan. I mean, LE3 states, if I can find it here, when considering proposals for the conversion of existing agricultural buildings for business or business-related purposes, regard will have to be given on the impact on the local character, residential amenity, highway safety, and whether the conversion would require substantial rebuilding as a result of any work that's carried out there. This barn is going to be altered totally because it's having done to it. If I can find the thing here, it's going to be made into 2 commercial units for B1 and B8. New doors, windows, external cladding, car parking, lorry parking, improved access and landscaping is taking place there. And if you go to the statutory consultees, they are against this. Environmental health, I am concerned about the proposal for such use in this open countryside and immediately adjacent to dwellings. I am familiar with the adjacent B1 and B8 site and the history of severe impact on residents living adjacent to it during various uses of the buildings. The nearest resident is barely 20 metres from the access road and 50 metres from the boundary of the development. The residents will be affected by large vehicles using the access road. And carries on. It's on page 153. And if you go over then to page 154, I've considered further information and still consider this is not an appropriate location to extend commercial activity, given that this was a greenfield site only a few years ago, and this building was intended as an agricultural sheepstead within a field. And the AONB, go on. The rural character and appearance in this part of the AOB is already been compromised by existing development, and as such, further encroachment or urbanised development, industry use and associated carpenter into undeveloped areas should be resisted in order to safeguard the character and conserving and enhancing the AONB. I mean, there's nothing there in favour of this development taking place, and therefore I recommend it for refusal.
Thank you, councillor Brown. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes. Councillor Key, the other ward member.
Yeah. Would you like to speak now, councillor
Yes, I
Key?
would. Yes, I would. The main thing on this, it's on an agricultural field. Now, surely if it's going to go into industrial, it would have to have a change of use of the actual land that it's on. The field, the actual shed was built as a sheep shed, right, for agriculture. Now, if it hadn't have been for the want of an agricultural use, there would probably never have been the possibility of this shed being granted planning permission. Just over the hedge from there, where the other industrial site is, Westerhope, there are units there that they've been trying to let for a long time. And now this, to me, is being sporadic development of the industrial area. There are units up on the aerodrome, which is traditionally a big industrial area, and there's units up there that are available. To me, this is completely wrong. I'm not sure whether there may not have even been a grant for this shed when it was built from being an agricultural building. Those units, those containers there, I don't ever remember a planning application coming for those containers to be there, so they could be there illegally anyway. But there is no way that this should actually be converted into industrial businesses when, as I say, just over the hedge to the left-hand side of that picture, there are units in there that they have had on the market for a long, long time and can't let. So I'm definitely against this application because it should stay as an agricultural building. Okay, we've heard that he's sold off 100 acres of land. That's an easy way then to actually try and get planning permission changed. But I still say that if it's not wanted for agriculture, the easiest thing would be to say, right, okay, take it down. And I know where this has actually happened before. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Key. Councillor Skinner?
Chairman, can I just come back for 1 second?
Yes.
The thing that Councillor Key's referring to, which is over the back here, is 56,000 square foot of industrial units, which they've been trying to let out for the last, well, since, just over 3 years. They've managed to rent out 10% of that in those 3 years. So they've still got sort of, 50,000 square foot of industrial unit, which they can't let. So, how's he going to find a buyer for this? I mean, over there, they're charging £10 per square foot per year to try and rent it, and they can't rent it out. And also on that particular site, going back sort of 4 years ago, East Devon were responsible, because it's in open countryside as such, East Devon were responsible for clearing out all the second-hand tyres that were there and left there that people dumped. And I think it was close on 100,000 tyres that East Devon were responsible for getting rid of because of the way the site was.
Thank you, councillor Brown. I wonder if Mr. Rose has any comment about this alternative site. I mean, we are dealing with this application that we got in front of us.
Yeah, well, if I just run through the issues that have been raised by the ward members, because I'm sat here thinking, if the application were refused, how we would be able to argue that at appeal. And Councillor Brown rightly mentioned policy LE3 of the neighbourhood plan. And he read it out, and it's clear that it says when considering proposals for the conversion of existing agricultural buildings for business use. So by default, that policy is supporting, it's saying that there will be occasions when we want to support the conversion of agricultural buildings to businesses. So that policy does give support for the proposal. The environmental health officer's later comments say if the policy objections can be overcome, then they propose that we condition to control the use, and those conditions are on the application. I understand the concerns about the impact on the neighbour, but there are conditions on here that are proposed, and we need to bear in mind that the applicant can convert 500 square metres of the 850 here pretty much without planning permission, and we wouldn't be able to put any conditions or controls on that at all. And I fear that that would have a greater impact on the neighbouring dwelling than if we control it through conditions. The AONB team have raised concerns, but subsequent to that, the landscape architect has been involved with the application, raises no landscape impact concern. And again, we wouldn't be able to get any additional planting through the fallback position. The change of use of the site, that's integral to this application, so that comes as part of it. With regard to the lack of need, or the applicant has stated why that is no longer needed for agricultural use, and I don't have anything to dispute that. No evidence I could put to an inspector to dispute that. And obviously there's policy support for the proposal, and in relation to the industrial units, there might be many reasons why those adjoining units aren't let, but as you heard from the agent, the applicant here has somebody lined up ready to go into the units, and if they were to go with that information to an inspector, I don't think we'd be on very strong ground trying to argue that there's some units let next door, so therefore we shouldn't allow this one. So I'm very concerned how we might be able to fight an appeal on those grounds. Thanks.
Thank you, that's very clear.
Can I just come, sorry to interrupt again, but can I just come back to Mr. Rose on the fact that they're saying they've got a tenant already lined up for it. When he got a further down this lane, he got a live work unit put in, which he claimed he had someone prepared to use it. As soon as he got planning permission, he then re-advertised it again. So how do we know that's not going to happen this time round?
We don't know that that's not going to happen this time down, but equally, I haven't got anything I can put to an inspector to say why there wouldn't be an occupier for this building or somebody interested in it.
But we have to take him at his word. Unfortunately, this happened before, but it's not to say it will happen again. But we have to take it as it's presented. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Albeit I wasn't obviously at the last application, but this application today is the most difficult, awkward application that we have in front of us. It appears to me that we are at a place by default and not by design. And I think one of the points, if I may reiterate what Councillor Key suggested, was saying, you know, if this application were to come forward as an industrial site on this site, would it be approved? Well, probably the answer to that would be no, it probably wouldn't be. So we're in a place whereby, do we want this to be converted into a industrial unit, knowing its location right next door? And all of you will know I'm very supportive of business and trying to drive our economic agenda. I would normally be jumping around supporting these sorts of applications, but this one is really a quite difficult one. And it's almost like your heart is telling you that this should be refused, but your head is telling you, how are we going to get over this, as Chris Rose has quite rightly identified in fighting this one against the planning inspectorate. So we're caught between a hard place and a rock, and that's the place we're in. And it's a very, very difficult one to have to administer. I do feel, and I take on board what members say, I would argue the case to say that if we were talking about economic development, I don't know that this particular area is somewhere that we would advocate in supporting on any great depth. What I would be supporting would be that, and the shame for me is, and as it was identified by Mr. Rose just earlier, that they had a user, it's a real great shame, which would have tipped the balance for me, would have been if we could have identified who that user was, we could have identified the reality upon that, and the benefits that that user would bring to the area and to jobs in that locality. The sad part is, it's just I have a user ready to go late in the day, as what it appears, with no substantial evidence as to who that is or why that is. I tend to treat with it with skeptical thoughts on the basis of they had a strong user and I were making a planning application, I would have ensured that that strong user use was put within this document to convince us as a planning authority that there's a real strong reason and evidence reason as to why we would be doing this. On conclusion, on coming to this, and it's really quite difficult, I feel I'm going to have to support the officers, but it's on the basis of by default and not by design. And the only reason I feel of supporting is because of the place we're in. We're stood on a three-legged stool, we've got the rope round our neck and somebody's about to kick one of the legs away. And I'm feeling on that basis, it's not something I'm particularly happy with doing. And I absolutely understand the ward members and where they're coming from. And I absolutely would like to get behind them. I just feel that if we do, we could be getting up in a bad place. And as Mr. Rose quite rightly pointed out, is that where are we going to be between refusing this application or not refusing the application, and the applicant either in two ways. One, he could go on and identify of developing out through permitted development rights 500 square meters from my understanding of what was said, or he could battle it out through the planning inspector and he could be likely to win, which means either way of those two cases, we as a planning authority lose control of what can happen on this site. So the reason I am going to lend support and will be putting forward a proposal to support this application is not because it sits particularly comfortable with me, but because I feel of the downside if we don't support this application and the place we could be in. I'd be quite happy to listen to other members who may add a little bit more to it than I, and people who have more knowledge than I, and I'm sure there's plenty on this committee do, who could add weight to a subjective weight, evidence-based weight, that would give good grounding why we could refuse this application. And Madam Chairman, may I add that if that was the case and there was good weight, I would quite happily withdraw my support to approve. But at this moment in time, I have heard nothing, seen nothing that says that if we refuse this application, we're putting ourselves into a good place, because I think we're putting ourselves in a worse place. And as I said before, this is being brought to us by design, by default, rather than design. And I find that a rather sad day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Pook.
Thank you. I'll go back to those well-used words where you've got to look at the application in front of us today. And that's not only the application, but also the actual position on the ground. The application, as we've heard from the officers, has got numerous policies supporting it. And also we've heard from the other Councillor Key and Councillor Brown policies which would not support it. But on the whole, that this is an application that can be supported by policy. We have a building there that also could be converted, as Councillor Skinner said, without us having any control. So I see no other option than to support, because if not, it's a building that's going to be converted one way or another anyway. And this way, as Councillor Skinner said, we can control it. And let's not also forget that whether or not there's other buildings for rent, this is going to be turned into industrial premises and will hopefully providing jobs. If it doesn't, it'll just end up being an empty shed sitting there doing nothing. So I will be supporting. I will be, if the vote comes again to support, I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pook. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, like everyone else, it'd be lovely if we had a magic wand, but we haven't got a magic wand. This has to be allowed to happen. It has happened effectively already. It will have permitted development rights, as Mr. Rose has said, and as such, it is no good considering it anymore as a farm building. We've lost that. It's gone. The only thing we're talking about is a small proportion of it not being industrial use anymore. By allowing this planning application, we get a landscaping scheme that we wouldn't be getting any other way. We get it looking better. We improve the area. We improve the AONB. We improve the rural economy. We turn a redundant eyesore of a building into something useful. as much as I understand what the ward members have said, they have no backing. Environmental health does not support that position. Highways are not against this. Our landscape architect quite rightly says this would be good. I mean, Councillor Skinner's reflection on heart and mind, possibly this isn't one of the hard ones. This is one of the easier ones where the mind has got to win this, because the heart will benefit from it in the short term when it gets done properly and gets converted. So I cannot support a refusal on this, because there is not a ground leg to stand on, whether 3, 4 or 5. They just don't exist.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Well, there are definitely pros and cons to this one. My concerns are to the amenity of local residents and the increase in traffic that may be generated. The fact it's in the AONB, and the AONB have commented and said the rural character and appearance is already compromised by existing development, and this is further encroachment, and that should be resisted. I'm concerned about the extra travel that will be generated, and also environmental health have not supported this. They still say they still consider this is not an appropriate location to extend commercial activity. However, as everyone has said, there are pros as well. The fact it's going to generate some employment in the area, the use of an otherwise redundant building, and the landscaping and improvement to the site has been referred to. Plus the fact that there is this fallback position that they can develop a large amount of the building without any permission whatsoever. I think we have to support it. I've got to say, the commercial viability of the proposal one way or the other is not our concern. The applicant doesn't really have to prove that there's a use for it. They just have to show that it's no longer required as a farm building, and as Chris has said, there's no reason to dispute that. Again, whoever takes it on as a tenant, that's hardly relevant, because they could leave the following week and we have a different tenant anyway. So it doesn't really matter whether there's going to be a tenant for this or not. That's a concern for the applicant. So I'm reasonably happy to support this. I think there are some concerns, but given the fallback position, I don't think we really can resist it.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. I have great understanding of what the ward members have said on this application, but following on from Councillor Ollie Davey, I would concur with what Councillor Davey has said. And the main issue for me is the fallback that this applicant has got. And I would prefer that as a planning authority, we have control over the whole of the building rather than just a small part of it. So I think I shall be supporting the application, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to really reiterate everything that's gone before. I think we're starting to go round in circles a little bit. Everyone's completely understands Councillor Key and Councillor Brown's concerns, but as Councillor Howe has said, everything he said is absolutely right. And if anybody hasn't yet supported the officer's recommendation to approve, I'd like to put that forward, please.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you.
Yes, the previous councillors, the last 6, have already stolen all my points, so I'm happy to approve the recommendation.
Thank you.
Yes, I
Councillor
also.
Chamberlain, yeah.
Hi, yes, sorry. Most of the points I was going to raise again have already been raised, and I just
Okay.
wanted to say that, you know, keeping control, I think, is the best way forward, and I support what Councillor Howe, Gazod, Skinner and McLaughlin have all said, so going forward I would
Yeah.
support that as well.
Okay. Councillor Pratt.
Yes, I think Mike has said it all. The local plan policy D8, which is to do with the reuse of rural buildings, and policy E4, the rural diversification. These are the policies which allow this application to go forward, and there's nothing further to consider, really. I support the application.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I ask Shirley to proposal, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I have a note that we had a recommendation to refuse from Councillor Brown and Councillor Key, followed by a recommendation to support the grant. And I was a bit confused as to whether Councillor Skinner was proposing that recommendation.
Yes,
so
I was.
is Councillor McLaughlin happy to second that recommendation? Although she said she was just
yes,
putting
I
it
am,
forward.
Shirley.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to second
Thank
that.
you.
Yes, thank you.
So therefore, as that came after the recommendation to refuse as a supplemental amendment, the recommendation to approve the planning application as per the officer's report and recommendation with conditions comes first. And then for information, that is the supplemental, and then we will take it again, I'm afraid, members, because that then becomes a substantive recommendation. So we have it first time round to support the application, to grant the application. So I need you to say whether you support the recommendation to approve, or you're against
Point
the
of order,
recommendation.
Chairman.
Yes, Chairman, I think
Point of order, Chairman.
Sorry. Yeah.
The refusal was put first.
It was. Don't
That
we
has to be
take
taken.
that? That's what I was trying to get clarification on. There's already been a proposal and the seconder.
Yes, and because there was a proposer and seconder for the amendment that came
It's an
afterwards.
amendment, Shirley. It's a direct contradiction. One's a refusal, one's an approval.
Yes, it is. It's a negative, isn't it? Direct negative.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Apologies, members.
So we
But
just
therefore-
take the proposal. Yes, sorry, Shirley.
No, that's fine. Therefore, we need the reasons to, if we are taking the refusal first, we need the reasons for refusal.
Yeah.
And the policies we are relying on for that refusal.
I think LE3 was quoted, wasn't it? In the neighbourhood plan?
If the proposer and seconder could clarify.
Yes.
LE2 and LE3, I think it is, yes. That's right, isn't it, David?
Yes. Yes, Colin.
And those are the only reasons. And what is those are the policies that it's contrary to, but what are the reasons it's contrary to those policies?
Reason it's a substantial change of building. And it's an open countryside.
Open countryside. And it's sorry, I didn't catch the first part.
Substantial alterations to the building.
Thank you. Therefore, members, if you could please vote as to whether you support the recommendation to refuse on that for those reasons, or you are against the recommendation to refuse for those reasons, or if you abstain.
Can I just interrupt, Chairman? We do have a public speaker, I believe, on this one. Are we not meant to be allowing him to speak, Mr. Metten?
That's on the next one, I think. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's the Seaton application.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it's on the next one. I do apologise. Sorry.
It's all right. It's where it is on the papers. That's all.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So we're taking a vote on the proposal put forward by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Key.
Amanda,
Okay.
do you want me to do
So-
this one?
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Yes.
Okay. Councillor Bloxham,
I'm against the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Brown,
For the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Chamberlain,
I'm against the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Davey,
I'm against the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor De Sarum,
Against the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Gazzard,
Against.
Councillor Howe,
Against.
Councillor Key,
Refuse the recommendation.
so you're for,
No, I'm against refusing the recommendation of approval.
So you're for the motion.
For the proposal to refuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
for, okay. Kathy McLaughlin, Councillor McLaughlin,
I'm against the proposal for refusal.
Councillor Pook,
I am against the proposal to refuse.
Councillor Pratt,
I'm against the proposal to refuse.
Councillor Skinner,
I'm against the proposal to refuse.
Councillor Woodward,
I'm against the proposal to refuse.
Councillor Ragg,
Against the proposal to refuse because I don't think it would stand up a good deal. I have every sympathy with the ward members.
Okay, so with 12 votes against the proposal to refuse, that means it's back to committee again.
Yeah.
We
Now
now
we-
have the recommendation to grant as per the officer's recommendation, which was following with the following conditions in the report. So if you could say you support the recommendation to approve, you're against the recommendation to approve, or you abstain.
Do we not have
back
to put a
to Councillor
proposal and seconder?
Yeah.
We
that's
had a
good.
proposer and a seconder in Councillor Skinner and Councillor McLaughlin.
That's right. Okay, that was the amendment. Yes, okay.
Okay, so we'll back to Councillor Bloxham,
I support the officer's recommendation to approve.
Councillor Brown,
Against the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Chamberlain,
I support the officer's recommendation to approve.
Councillor Davey,
I support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor De Sarum,
I support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Gazzard,
For.
Councillor Howe,
Or, yeah, support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Key,
Against approval.
Councillor McLaughlin,
I support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Pook,
Support the officer's recommendation to approve.
Councillor Pratt,
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Skinner,
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Woodward,
I support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Ragg.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Thank you. So with only 2 votes against, I can confirm that application has been approved.
Thank you. Right, we move on to the next application now. It's 192445 Full Minor, and it's in Seaton, Vintage Court, the Square. And we have somebody who wants to speak, Mr. Metham. Could we admit him to the meeting, please?
I believe he's in.
Right, okay, thank you. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Metham. You will have 3 minutes to speak, but we'll leave Mr. Rose to give his presentation first.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application to demolish 2 shops and a flat in Seaton and construct 2 retail units and 8 flats. So you have the location on front of you at the moment. So this is the main square in Seaton, sort of heart of the town centre. We've got this little courtyard here that leads through to the application site, and you can see that the sort of buildings at the rear at the moment and the access position. The application's before you because it has the support of the ward member. The site is in the conservation area, so the boundary of the conservation area runs along the boundary, the back of the site, the boundary with the co-op car park, and it's in the town centre of Seaton. And you'll notice that there's objections to the proposal from the town council. And just moving on, so this is the existing layout. This is the proposed layout, so it's to remove the buildings that are at the rear at the moment, keep this pedestrian access way through, and then to build this unusual shaped extension at the rear. So this is the image from the square at the moment. So you can see the alleyway through in the building that will be demolished, and the building will be put back behind this building through that alleyway. And these are the existing elevations of the rear of the building at the moment, which you'll see clearer in the photos. And these are the elevations of the building that's proposed. So you've got the existing building to the frontage, and then you've got this new building coming off the back, which is in effect over 4 floors with car parking below. Again, that's one of the northern elevations, eastern elevation, and you can see it in the context there. And there's some better images of that I can show you in a minute. So we've got parking at the lower level, and then we've got 2 commercial units, and you're starting to get the flats. And then behind that, on a raised terrace over the car park, you've got this terraced area. And then as you go up the floors, you get the flats to the units there. And this is the CGI image. So these buildings here, if you can see my cursor, are the rear of the existing buildings, and this is the proposed building that's coming off the back of it. So again, this is new, off the back of the rear, coming out of this unusual shaped building there, looking back to the rear of the existing buildings, which I'll discuss in a minute. And we got some photos. So this top photo is the existing view. So these are all the buildings here that front onto the main street, the other side, conservation area boundary around here. And a bit like the scheme we had earlier in the conservation area, you've got all your main buildings fronting onto the high street, and then you have subservient buildings as you get back to the rear and the sort of service areas. And this photo here shows how the new proposal would sit within that. So you can see the relationship of the scale of the building that's proposed to the existing buildings. You can see the terrace that is proposed there and the boundary to the car park. And again, this view, existing view from across the car park into the conservation area and the building that is proposed there. So the principle is acceptable. It's in the built-up area boundary, and it's going to potentially tidy up the site. So we're looking back at the site over here from the photos of the car park, and you can see the poor condition that's in at the moment, with the shop here vacant. So one of the benefits of the proposal is it will tidy up the site, and being in the conservation area, we've got a duty to make sure we conserve and enhance the character and appearance of that conservation area. And they are the further flats just further down the street. Sorry, let's go back to that. So you'll see in the report that there's concerns from the conservation area and the town council about the scale of development proposed. As I said, we're in the conservation area, and you would usually expect these buildings at the frontage to be the main buildings, and then the buildings at the rear, as we've got here, to be subservient. But you would have seen from the elevations I put up that this building isn't considered to be subservient to those buildings at all. It's of a very large scale, it will be very prominent, and it doesn't really follow the pattern of development that we've got on this part of the conservation area of the buildings fronting the street and then those low buildings behind. The scheme dominates the rear of those buildings. It dominates the view from the car park. The height isn't considered to be respective of those surrounding buildings, and it's of a very bulky design. And there's also concern about the visual impact from this raised terrace, as you'll see in the report. So because of that, the conservation team have raised that there's substantial harm to the views into that part of the conservation area, despite the tidying of the site. And when you have substantial harm, there have to be substantial public benefits in which to support the proposal. And it's not considered that they are present. So there's concerns about the design and bulk and the visual impact of this scheme not being characteristic of the area and being harmful to that conservation area. There's also a secondary concern, although of equal concern in the report, relates to the amenity impact. So this is the rear here, looking down on the rear of the existing buildings, and at 12 meters or so away, you get all these windows here on the back of the building looking back towards the flats. In effect, if you see this image here, so all these windows in these flats here will be looking at the windows in the rear of the proposed flats there at a distance of about 12 meters. That's considered to be detrimental to their privacy and harmful to their outlook, given the bulk of the proposed building and the close relationship. There's no highway safety harm. Site's well located, the access is good, and there are benefits to the scheme, as I say, from tidying up the site and from the 2 retail units proposed and from the 8 flats. But it's considered that this scheme is out of character and too bulky and will harm the impact, harmful impact on the amenity of those adjoining residents. So for those reasons, it's recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Call on Mr. Metham to speak. Mr. Metham, you have 3 minutes. Mr. Metham there?
Metham, you're on mute. Yeah, he's
Hello,
on
can you
mute
hear
at
me?
the moment.
That's better.
Right, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, councillors, and thank you for allowing me to speak in support of the application. There are several points I'd like to make before posing a question. The proposal will replace a dilapidated space, an eyesore in desperate need of improvement. The application site is highly visible from Harbour Road and the car park. The application site sits behind a row of properties in a conservation area, and therein lies the single main issue with this application. It's within a conservation area, an area with strict rules to preserve or enhance its character or appearance. The row of properties in question front onto 4th Street and the square, and it is the view of the frontages of these properties which help define the character of Seaton, and it is this view which deserves to be preserved or enhanced. Generally, the rear elevations and yards of these properties are not attractive at all. The proposed building is, from most angles, not visible from within the conservation area. It sits below the majority of surrounding roof and ridge lines. Outside of the conservation area, where the proposed building would be highly visible, and as commented upon by your planning officer in his report, the proposal complements the recent regeneration of the area with a contemporary design. In terms of urban separation, it really is a very separate area, which has already become visually very different with the construction of Pisanis, the Grove, and the adjoining flats. Concern has been raised about impact on the amenity of adjacent occupiers. Your officer does, however, accept that within a town centre, one expects there to be a tight-knit relationship, which at times means there can be mutual overlooking. The proposal is largely perpendicular to the existing windows, and the curved design improves the situation by ensuring windows are at oblique angles. Local councillor Marcus Hartnell supports the application, saying it will improve both the vitality and appearance of the town centre. We find ourselves in strange and difficult times. We face an unprecedented threat to our town centres. We must do what we can to inject vitality into them and to encourage people to live in them, as stated in Policy E9 and Strategy 25. My question to you as the representatives of the town is this: is the preservation of an unprepossessing view of the rear elevations of a small number of buildings in the conservation area a sufficient reason to reject a much needed improvement and significant investment in the town?
Got 30 seconds remaining.
I hope you'll be able to exercise your discretion in this case, where the policy directing your officers, whilst entirely appropriate elsewhere in the conservation area, seems overly restrictive and unnecessary in this particular location. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Metham. Are the ward members here? I don't think they are they?
No, there's no ward members.
Okay, then over to you, committee. Councillor Pook.
Oh, thank you for letting me speak. If we can look at the executive summary and sort of go through those points, I think the first one is very telling. It says the site is visible from the car park. Yes, that's where the only place you'll be able to see it from. And although you've got the old buildings behind, if you look slightly to the right, spanning round, and I think that's a photograph on screen at the moment, you'll see the new flats, you'll see the new LED and office buildings, and then going around the car park. This is a new and an emerging part of Seaton, and it needs regenerating. And then just look at what you're looking at the moment. The conservation officer states harm to the heritage asset. The heritage asset is from the square, looking at the old buildings from the other side. They won't be changed. Are we really saying what we can see in those photographs is a heritage asset which really needs to be protected and kept and claimed? I just cannot see that that's a viable argument. The overlooking issues, they've been addressed, and as the applicant said, that they've been discussing, and the architect's been working with the planners to mitigate those as much as possible. We are in a town urban environment. Going to the actual loss of employment or commercial space, there may be a loss in square meterage, but the numbers of commercial offerings will remain. But look at the difference. There'll be quality, new opportunities there, something which people will want to work in and want to visit. I don't know how many people have gone down that little alleyway. It's a little cul-de-sac at the moment. This will open up into something much wider. So you'll have quality, new commercial offerings. So I can't see anything to really oppose this. You know, Seaton needs regeneration, and okay, the subjective design might not be on everyone's liking. To my mind, it fits in very well with the new designs, new buildings which have already been have gone in the last few years, and this will actually this hopefully will act as a bit of a kickstart to show that people are wanting to invest in Seaton and get it moving again. We've got the stalling of the Fosbury development across the road. This is something, if it goes through, will actually show that Seaton does mean business. We've got people who've got confidence in Seaton, and we will get a new, a more modern area to Seaton to complement, to work alongside the more historic side, which you view from the square. So even though I accept I'm the first speaker and there'll be many more, but I could not support refusal, and I would actually like to propose approval of the application in contradicting the officer's recommendation. So I'm quite happy to offer that as a proposal now. If there's anyone wants to come on board straight away and second that proposal.
I'm happy to second it, Councillor Pook. Councillor de Serme, happy to second it.
In which case, thank you very much, Bruce. In which case, we have a proposal then on the table, which is to approve the recommendation. And I'll be happy for you, Chairman, then to take the meeting forward and take things forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chairman. Yes, Chairman. Councillor de Serme.
All right. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And in fact, if Councillor de Serme hadn't seconded it, I would have. I absolutely concur with all the things that Councillor Pook has spoken about. I actually think that Seaton is a real up-and-coming town. It's got a lot going for it in lots of ways, and it needs regeneration. This is an input of development money that is going to come in as investment into the town. And as far as talking about in the report, there's an overdevelopment within the site. What poppycock? We've just did that in Honiton. There's not overdevelopment of the site at all. That's just a nonsense. It's all about 8 flats in the middle of a town centre. What we need to do is to have these town centres that we have in East Devon thriving. We need people in them. We need people using the shops. We need people having designs that are moving forward into the 21st century. It's all very well looking back into the past. Fantastic. And I'm all for conservation in the right places at the right time. But what I'm not for is in this particular application that's in front of us, I'm absolutely in full support of what Councillor Pook has said, and no doubt Councillor de Serme is going to add to that flavour by seconding Councillor Pook's recommendation. And I'm as I was a previous chairman of Seaton Regeneration, it was a place I knew not that much about being an Exmouth boy, but I tell you what, I fell in love with Seaton. I could see so many things that could really happen with investment, look into the future. And Seaton's got a real ability to lift itself and raise the bar. And this only enhances that and gives confidence to other developers to look at the things that could be done in a place such as Seaton. Now, I'm right behind it, fully going to be supporting this application. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor de Serme, seconder.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to second this. I understand that we obviously are facing, it is in a conservation area, so I fully get that and appreciate and understand that. But we also have to be mindful of Seaton, that Seaton needs regeneration, as previous speakers have said. And there is policy support for it, as the applicant's agent said, under policy E9 and strategy 25. In particular, strategy 25 talks of the plan for longer modest growth. So I think that is the public benefit which outweighs the harm in this particular case. So for that reason, I'm happy to support what Councillor Pook and Councillor Skinner have already said. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
This one has challenged me the most of all of them on our agenda. Reading the report, I felt our officers have got it wrong. Having seen the photos, I don't think it's overdevelopment. I don't think it's too big. I just don't like the design. And I've got to be frank about this. I don't think it's the angle design going away, and I don't think it's the curved design on the other side that we can't see in the photos. But it is the 3 large windows staring at the car park, which just seems out of character, out of place, and everything else. If those were changed, I might actually support this. But everything else has been said is correct. I cannot see the harm to the conservation area when you look around this car park, which it's facing into, and see every other modern building there is there. But that design is just sticking with me a tiny bit. And it is those 3 large windows directly facing me, which is just totally out of keeping of every other design building there is around there. There is no other that I can see large windows like that. and I just think it's wrong. It's sticking with me, so I'm struggling. But I'm going to carry on listening to the argument at present. But in principle, I think it's a good idea. I just design not entirely sure with, but we'll go on.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. I think the one bit that I'm certainly not comfortable with is the overlooking and the close proximity of the proposed building to the existing buildings. I mean, 12, is it 12 feet? 12
meters.
Meters. Yes, it seems very close. Anyway, Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Yes, I think we can all agree that this is obviously an area that needs development. And I support the principle Chris has said, that there is every reason to support the principle of development here. But I too have problems with the building that's actually proposed here. I think the size and the design of it are just out of keeping. And I notice that policy D1, which has been helpfully quoted by Seaton Town Council, asks that proposals respect the key characteristics and special qualities of the area. Now, the fact that there are a lot of modern buildings around, I don't think should detract from that. I think we have an opportunity here to ensure that this building, whatever else has gone on, that this building is sympathetic to the local area and does not produce a building with a large bulk that completely dominates the area there. And I support the idea of something in here, and I welcome the flats that are proposed, but I just don't think that this design is the one to do it.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very interesting, isn't it, that how some people love the design, as I do. I think the back of the design, as said before, is on the car park, and that's the bulk. And the front of the design, which I believe you will be in front of when you walk down through the alleyway, what a fantastic area for coffee shop or just a really lovely plaza area with that fantastic curve. Inside, it's great. And agreeing with Councillor Howe, those windows on the front possibly are fairly incongruous, actually, and it may be something to do with the colour of the render or whatever that's cladding or whatever's going to go there. It would look less incongruous if it was the same colour as the rest. But on saying that, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Seaton to have something really modern and in fact around the curve looks really classy. So yeah, so I think I would have to support this being built and go against officer recommendation, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you. Actually, everything I wanted to say has been said. I would
Okay.
support Councillor Pook's recommendation, and Catherine McLaughlin just said exactly how I felt about the design. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the points that I wanted to raise against it have already been made, so I won't go through those again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a recommendation not to go with the, or proposal not to go with the officer's recommendation. Can you sum that up, please, Shirley?
I was just wondering if Chris Rose would like to come back and say something to members.
Chris?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, the officer view on this was very much, I think it mirrors some of what the members were saying in terms of, yes, we see the potential of development here and want something to happen, but as you can tell from the report, really the concerns were about the scale and the design of the building here, and certainly how that sits against the existing buildings there and the decking. And the bulk of that, and I think some of that's reflected in the comments about the windows. And just in terms of the conservation area, it may be to the rear of these properties, but it's still in the conservation area. And we have a duty not only to make sure that the front elevations are in conservation area are protected, but also the rear and views into that conservation area. And obviously members are aware of the comments on that from the conservation officer and the town council. So I appreciate the design subjective, but the view of officers was that yes, something could go here, but this wasn't quite the design or bulk of building that we feel should be going there. And then the other point that hasn't really been discussed that much with members that we have concern with is this 12 meters distance between the windows of the proposed dwellings back towards some of those flats and the impact it will have on the outlook of those. So the outlook of these flats here at the moment is quite open and across the car park, and to some extent that's going to be enclosed in with some of the flat windows 12 meters away. So that was our second concern with the application. Thanks.
Thank you. Back to you, Shirley.
Thank you,
To
Chair.
confirm the proposed recommendation. Well,
I think as we are have the proposal to approve, I think we may need to consider delegating conditions to be appended to that if the proposer, Councillor Pook and Dasaram, agree with that.
Yes, committee. I'm quite happy to defer the actual conditions to the for the officers to agree, delegated permission to agree. But otherwise, I just want to go back to the overall benefit of the scheme. This will, I don't think there's any significant harm to the historic the heritage asset, and the fact that it's going to kickstart Seaton, I think it far outweighs anything there. And when I heard the comments about big windows, I just went onto Google Maps. You spin around and you look at the other new buildings. If those aren't big windows, I don't know what are. So I'm not saying one thing should defend another, but there are windows there. So just to sum up, I'm quite happy for the the officers to negotiate the actual final conditions, but I'd like to continue with support of the application and propose approval.
And can I add in delegation with the ward members, please?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. So could we take a vote on that then?
Yes, members, if you could please indicate whether you support the recommendation to approve, you're against the recommendation to approve, or whether you abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Brown.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Davey.
I oppose the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Dasaram.
I support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Gazzard.
Against.
Councillor Howe.
Abstain.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Pook.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Pratt.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Skinner.
Support the recommendation to approve.
Councillor Woodward.
Against.
Councillor Ragg.
Against the proposal to approve.
There's 9 votes for approval. There's 1, 2, 3 votes against and 1 abstention. So that has been approved.
There's 4 recommended.
1, 2, 3, 4 against?
Yes, 4 against.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I agree with
Yeah.
4 against.
Back to you.
Thank you. The last application is 192834 OUT and 200482 RES, West Hill and Aylesbury, Hasta la Vista, Windmill Lane, West Hill, Ottery St Mary. And we have a speaker, Mr. Paley. Is he in?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Paley. Welcome to our planning meeting.
Thank you.
You will be given 3 minutes to speak after Mr. Rose has made his presentation. Okay, over to you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Chairman. So we've got 2 applications in front of you here in one report. So the first is an outline application on the site, and the second is a reserve matters application. And the application's before you because there's a ward member objection to the reserve matters application. We've brought both together because both applications in a way relate to the same development and certainly on the same site. So you'll see from the report that an outline for a dwelling on this site has been granted previously. So that granted the principle of development, but that has expired. And off the back of that application, they submitted the reserve matters application. And they have submitted a second outline application because the original one expired, although the government have announced recently that it might be extending the consents for applications. But in effect, we've already granted outline consent on the site. And it's for a single dwelling. So you can see the plot here in West Hill. And again, and this is the site. So this is the main tree, which I'll make reference to, and it's the front garden of this property. And there's also boundary treatments along here and along there. So you can see the canopy of the tree on the site, the key part of it. And this is the layout for how a single-story bungalow could fit on the site along this frontage. And that's the design of the bungalow. So the reserve matters application has these details, but in effect, it will be the same for the outline, a single dwelling on the plot as such. And again, we've had details in to show how the location of the plot will protect the tree on the site, which is this tree here. So this is the application site in here where the grass is. The application property is off to the right, and you can see the neighbouring property in the distance. So we're stood on the site here looking back up to the application property, and you can see where the windows are in relation to that. And this is a view along the street. So the site is here off to the right. So the principle of development in both cases is acceptable. We're in the built up area boundary of the settlement, and there's support for neighbourhood plan policy for infill development, which both of these applications will provide. And of course, in terms of the principle, we've already granted outline consent on the site. In terms of the visual impact, it's considered to be acceptable. It's a bungalow. It's set back from the street here, and as you could see from the photos, there are already properties along this street that are quite close to the back of the pavement edge, and there's planting to the boundaries, which is also proposed to be retained. And it's not considered that the proposal, even in outline or reserve matters, would be of a density that's out of character with the area. And obviously, the principle was visual impact considered acceptable previously. In terms of the amenity and visual impact, there'd be single story, no windows that could face these windows of the existing property. And you can see that there's a boundary along the property with a neighbour that will be retained, and there's minimal windows in that rear elevation. And at single story, it's not considered that the building will be harmful to either of those neighbours. The boundary treatment be retained, this tree would be retained, and the footprint of the building can be put out or is proposed outside of the canopy of that building. So both applications are recommended for approval. The outline, again, because we previously granted it and it's considered that there's suitable space on the site to house a bungalow, and the reserve matters because the details that have been submitted showing the bungalow demonstrate how it can protect the trees and the immunity of those neighbouring properties. So in light of that, both applications are recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Paley, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Andrew Paley. I'm from Bean Designed, and I'm the agent for Mr. Flowers on these applications. Appreciate these are the last applications today, so I will be brief. I'm basically speaking to support your officer's recommendation and to summarise a few points. In regards to the reserve mass application, it's fully compliant with all the conditions under the existing outline consents. The principle for new dwelling was established. The design is a modest 2-bedroom bungalow, and it's fully compliant with the National Described Space Standards. It's been designed to comply with policy D6 in terms of an air source heat pump, which seemed to cause a few issues with the tree officer, but that seems to have been resolved. Solar panels and good quality of natural light and amenity outside. It has been carefully designed in consideration with the surrounding properties on Windmill Lane, and it appears that all the initial concerns raised in the application, with the exception of the policy for the neighbourhood plan, have been addressed by officers in their report. The outline application, as Mr. Rose stated, is a simplified version of this, just demonstrating that we can comfortably fit a 2-bedroom modest-sized bungalow onto the site without any negative impact on the setting or any neighbours or trees in the area. Ultimately, I hope to support your officer's recommendation, and if you do have any further questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paley. Right, over to members. Councillor Skinner.
Oh, sorry, can I speak, please?
Oh, sorry, yes,
sorry.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I have a little note came through just now. Yes,
Thank
please
you.
do. Are there any other ward members who wish to speak?
I think I'm the only ward member. So,
Okay. Go ahead then, Jess. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. I won't speak for 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I am not supporting or hoping that you won't support this planning application, and that's mainly to do with the neighbourhood plan. So after the first outline plan was granted, the West Hill and Ottery St Mary neighbourhood plan was introduced, and I believe that both the new outline planning application and the reserve matters application run contrary to that. In particular, policy NP 26 of the neighbourhood plan, which states that proposals for development should reflect the established character and development pattern of their surroundings and should preserve key features of the village, including trees, hedge banks, spacious gardens, and individuality between the properties. So I think the key thing in that particular policy is the spacious gardens, because obviously this is going to be built in the spacious front garden. And the second policy, which I believe that it doesn't comply with, is NP3, which relates to infill backland and residential garden development. And that states that proposals for residential development for one or more dwellings on infill backland and residential garden sites will be resisted if they would lead to overdevelopment of the site or the appearance of cramming. And I believe personally that there will be an element of cramming, putting this building in the front garden. And the only other point that I want to very briefly make is that on one of the plans that Mr. Rose showed, it showed the arc of shading, the tree protection plan, and it with a yellow line. So you can see, according to that, it's quite faint on that the drawing, but you can see that actually I think there may well be a conflict between the shading of the big walnut tree, which is T1, and the proposed bungalow, and that's of concern for the future of tree T1. So that's all I've got to say. I have concerns about the neighbourhood plan and the potential impact on T1 and conflict between the bungalow and the walnut tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Right. Philip Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got a question first, if I might, to Mr. Rose, and I'm trying to read it here. I thought I had it. Pursuant to the 8-line planning permission was granted in 16. Is that still compliant? Is it still in play? The outline planning permission.
So no, we've got an interesting situation here in that that ran out. I think it's about a month ago now. But they got the reserve matters application in time.
Yeah.
So as at this moment in time, that consent has expired, but the government at the moment are taking legislation through, which would mean that that consent will probably be extended until April next year. Because the government are saying, because of the coronavirus, they want to extend planning permission. So anything that expired after March will in effect get extended until March next year. So assuming that legislation comes in, which we're expecting to come in the next week or so, what doesn't have consent at the moment will have consent again. I hope I haven't made that too confusing.
No, I absolutely take on board what you've said. And the reason for me asking the question, Madam Chairman, through you, is because obviously it does make quite the difference, because of course in the position that we're in. I actually support the ward member, Councillor Jess Bailey, in the comments that she has made. I see West Hill as a place that is quite different from lots of other places. And what this does is it just reinforces the idea that everybody, say everybody, that's wrong to say that, but many people within the West Hill area that by the very design and culture of what West Hill was always born about, was large houses with large gardens, is that we're consistently getting more and more houses into more gardens, and it is becoming more urbanized. And I always thought that West Hill was always quite different from everywhere else because it was a place of what it is, and having some houses that are expensive houses with big gardens and lots of space, it fills a need for certain types of people. And on that basis, what we see is I see people coming forward with more and more houses in the gardens, and they're just getting more and more built up. And it's not something that I actually feel that particularly comfortable with. I like West Hill as it is, whatever it may be, and no doubt other members may have views on that. But I think, again, we've got ourselves into between a place and a hard rock. By going by 16, I was working on the basis it had run out. The question why I asked Mr. Rose was the very question about the outline, because, of course, if that had been left and gone, then you could see where we might be able to put up a case. It's now, in answer to that question, it's now making it quite difficult that, of course, we're now going to struggle with a case, if that is the case, that it goes on until April of next year, because that is quite a long time, and I don't see where we're able to go. I'm actually would like to make a recommendation, and I'm gonna struggle here. What you could have asked me for, what reasons am I going to say for a recommendation of refusal? And the reason for that is some of the points I've made out further is that the spacious front gardens element of NP3, which has already been mentioned, I think is quite a powerful argument. And if we don't hold to such arguments as NP3, although we are going to struggle with the outline application, I understand that. But if we don't struggle, we don't draw a line in the sand somewhere, I can see this being replicated throughout West Hill. Anybody buying a house, just let's put a house in the front garden. So, Madam Chairman, if I may, I shall listen to the debate, listen to what others have to say. I'm chucking in something that's a little bit different from the recommendation that's been put forward with approval with conditions, on the basis I feel that I would like to refuse this application, and I will go from there and see if it, of course, if we can A, get a seconder, and B, hear the debate as it goes on. Thank you.
So you're not making that a proposal yet, then?
Yes, I am. I'm making. I'm proposing a recommendation for refusal. What will come in time, Madam Chairman, through you, is I will need to put my arguments as to the officers, and Shirley is going to ask me on what basis am I refusing, and I will come up with those as we go forward. Thank you.
Right. Is there a seconder for the proposal, please? No.
Madam Chairman, I would like to second that proposal of Philip Skinner.
Yeah, is that Councillor Pratt?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, I've got to go by your voice because I can't see you on my screen. Okay, so we've got a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Mike Howe.
Thank you very much. I'm against refusal, and I'm also against what Councillor Skinner said pretty well. There is a fundamental change, and that is West Hill now has a neighbourhood plan, which means this application, if it was back in 2017, wouldn't have been approved most likely. So you can't have many more of these, but you cannot apply policy retrospectively. This was granted under a different policy regime. It still exists with regard to the reserve matters. So as far as that's concerned, it has an outline application. And then you have to go, so the reserve matters is, what can you object to on the reserve matters? A building can go there. Is the reserve matters any objectionable points? And I can't find one there. So then if you move on again and go, right, so you've got a planning application with the reserve matters application sitting there. What is wrong with the other outline application on the same grounds? You have a planning permission sitting there, particularly if you've got government changing the dates even further, which, let's face it, they're going to. We know they're going to. So we haven't got grounds for a refusal. But the main point I'm making was Councillor Skinner worried about the other gardens. That can't happen. It really shouldn't happen because we have, correction, West Hill has a new neighbourhood plan that stops garden development, apart from in extreme cases, let's say, because there's always the odd one that might get through. But this cannot be legislated backwards on a new policy. As such, this has to be allowed to happen, unless anyone can find design or something else weird in here. There are no reasons for refusal that I can see at all. But so I shall support approval, hopefully, if this motion to refuse fails. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think that each application has to be treated on its individual merits. So if you're looking at other developments, as Councillor Skinner alluded to, then clearly we would have to look at it on its different merits. But what we are faced with here today in the documentation shows that there is policy support for it, particularly in relation to policies D1 and NP 26. I think that's quoted at page 195 of the report, where it says, as such, the applications are considered to meet the objectives of policy D1 and NP 26. And basically it then goes on to say at the bottom of page 195, in the light of the above, the impact on neighbouring community is considered to be acceptable. So for that reason, as Councillor Howe has indicated, that there are no reasons for refusal, I would probably put myself into the supporting the recommendations category. So thank you very much for your listening, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor De Sarum. So there we have a proposal to refuse. Now, is this the outline or the reserve matters? Which one are we dealing with first? Shirley, could you advise?
Sorry, Chair, I was finding my cursor to click on the unmute. We were intending on taking the outline first and then the reserve matters application, thereby having two votes.
Yeah.
Councillor Skinner.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I be able to speak on this one? I haven't been. I have put a sign up asking to speak.
Oh, I can see Tony Woodward now, but is that Jeff Pratt again?
Yes.
No, you're not showing. Your blue hand's not showing.
Oh, sorry.
I'll leave it with you, Chair,
Wrong
to
sign.
finish off the speakers first.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah.
I do want to
As you
speak on this matter.
seconded, you go ahead then.
You're allowing me to
Councillor
go
Pratt.
ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. may I have permission to ask a question of Chris Rose, please,
Of
first?
course.
Chris, the first application you say is going to be extended by the government on time. It's lapsed at the moment.
Yeah, so
but-
there's legislation going. I think, in fact, it's gone through the Houses of Parliament. I think it's about to go through the House of Lords next week, and then it should get royal assent, because I understand, I don't think there's any, I think it's got cross-party support. So I think in a week's time, we'll be in a position where that outline consent that has expired will be extended until the end of March next year.
Yes, well, with the greatest respect, as at today's date, it hasn't passed through Parliament. Therefore, it's not law. So we go back, and the first application, as we speak, stands lapsed, doesn't it?
Yes, as of this moment in time, yes.
Yeah. So that's how we proceed.
We
today.
do, but we need to be careful that if we refuse it today and we get an appeal next week, and the government bring the legislation in next week, we're then not going to be in a strong position. And all indications are at the moment that there's no reason why that isn't going to come into force next week.
What do you mean we're not in a strong position?
Well, because if we refuse this outline or if we refuse the outline on the basis there isn't one already in force, and then in a week's time the applicant can turn around and say, well, yes, that outline's been extended, there's already one in place, it makes it hard to argue against renewing an outline permission when there's one already in place. It's a material consideration that there's already a consent
it'd be
there.
hard to argue if there was an appeal?
Yeah.
Yes, if there's an appeal,
but the
yes.
point is, I'm sure an inspector wouldn't allow that because everyone knows in the law that the legislation has not been passed. Therefore, we must deal with this application today as the law stands today.
You are correct.
There can't be any argument about that.
Well, no, the issue I'm raising is, whilst that might be the issue today, when we come to deal with an appeal, members need to be aware that the position might have changed, and therefore the chances of winning the appeal are going to be slim.
But I think this is important. Could we have Shirley's advice on that, as she's the lawyer present? Am I saying what I think is correct, that the matter stands as it is today?
Yes, however, as ever with the law, in relation to planning appeals, the council has to be seen to be reasonable. Now, the business and planning bill to which Chris is referring is due to have its final reading and is likely to become law on the 20th, which is Monday. And if, as he says, we refuse it now, perfectly legally today, in determining a planning appeal, the inspector will look to see, were we reasonable in refusing at this moment in time as well, in relation to any costs, implications flowing from the refusal.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Shirley, because that's what I was going to contribute, that we could be liable for costs for not treating the application reasonably. We know this legislation is coming, so we can't claim ignorance of, as a reason for turning this down. So I think we've got to be very careful.
I haven't finished, Chair. I would like to go on now.
Okay.
I want to get that point sorted first. The second point I wanted to make was, in fact, policy MP3 in the neighbourhood plan, which Councillor Jess Bailey recited. So I won't go through it again, other than to say that NP3 supports a refusal on this matter because it's set out there quite clearly that any residential infill, any infill in a residential garden would not be granted if the development gave the appearance of cramming. In other words, an overdevelopment of a site. And this is what has happened here. So my view is that this is why I'm supporting Philip Skinner, that the application on its merits can be refused, and I'm relying on the neighbourhood plan. That's what a neighbourhood plan is for.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Howe in that it was granted under an earlier planning regime, and that although the neighbourhood plan has been put in place, it would prevent similar or further infill going forward. So this should be the last of this type of development. But we would also get into difficulty, as has been mentioned, on appeal, I think, because we know if the bill can be passed next week, why do we not postpone this application for a month? And then we will know the effect of that new statute upon this application. I don't think a month would be too long to wait for that to be about, and then we know exactly what the legal position was. So,
are you making that an amendment?
Yes, as a proposal to postpone this application.
To defer.
Defer, yes.
Is there a seconder for the amendment?
I'd
Yes,
support,
there is. I'd like to
support that,
support
Madam
that.
Chairman.
Yeah.
I think, Madam Chairman, could I make a point, please? Because I've actually recommended to have a refusal on this application. It's clear to me, and I've been at this quite a long time, and it's clear to me that that's not going to get held up. And the reason that Councillor Jeff Pratt, and I very much thank him for his support, but there comes a time when you must know when you're sort of beaten. What I think is fundamentally important, and Councillor Pratt made a very good point regarding the position we're in, and Councillor Woodward has put forward the point of a deferment for a month or whatever it is until we know where we are. That absolutely does make a difference, of course, in the position that we're in. I don't think the applicant is going to particularly, considering it got till next April, be in a position whereby that would be particularly detrimental to them. And what it does do is it clears up a point for us as a planning committee, because these decisions that are made for in perpetuity. So once we've made them, we've made them. There is the course, I think, with Mr. Rose is absolutely right, and Shirley the same, and to Councillor Pratt, that of course, if we are of the knowledge, you're absolutely right, Councillor Pratt, and say where we are today in law is absolutely right. It has not actually gone through the House of Lords. But what we've also got to take is the evidence that we are known to be aware of, and we are aware of the fact it's gone through the House of Commons, and we're aware of the fact it is about to go through the House of Lords, and we're aware of the fact that there's cross-party support. So we are aware of the fact by next Monday it is more than likely to be in place. Now, to ensure that everybody gets into the same place, I take on board why Councillor Woodward has put forward the proposal to defer for a month. I will withdraw, if Councillor Pratt doesn't mind, I would suggest that we withdraw from a recommendation of refusal and move towards a recommendation of deferral for a month. We all know where we are. We'll have a very clear view of where we're going, what we're doing, and I think that would be absolutely fair for all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. We have an amendment by Tony Woodward, seconded by Councillor Chamberlain. Do we take that amendment now? Do other people want to speak? Can we go to Mike Howe, please?
Just to point out, you've lost the motion, so you can't have an amendment to the motion.
No,
the motion
have we
doesn't stand
lost?
anymore. But
have we lost the motion? Have we lost
Yes,
the motion? Because
Councillor
I
Skinner
haven't
has
heard from
withdrawn
Jeff
it.
Pratt.
Councillor Skinner's withdrawn it. You can't have a.
He's withdrawn it.
Yeah.
He didn't ask his seconder if he's happy with that.
No, but he's withdrew it.
Okay,
So
that's
then-
okay then.
So can I then make a proposal that or a motion that we defer this for a month, and that's a new proposal to look at it once we know what new guidance comes in from the House of Lords?
Can I just, I'm not arguing against what you want to do. What I just want to say is, why are we putting a month on it? This could be decided next Wednesday. We have another planning committee meeting, and the Wednesday after. Just say deferred until the matter is clarified, and bring back as soon as possible is all I'm saying. That's all I wanted to say. All right.
That's fine by me.
Is that okay? And then that issue goes away. So, members, are you happy to take a vote on this now? Is there anyone else who wants to speak? I see Steve Gazzard's got his hand up. Steve? Are you there, Steve?
Yeah, happy to go to the vote, Chair. Hello?
Sorry?
I'm happy to go to the vote.
Okay.
Councillor Ragg, can I come back, please?
Yes, Chris.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I really don't want to make this any more complicated than it's become. But we've got two applications here. I can understand the issue about delaying the outline.
Yeah.
Until we know what's happening with the government legislation, but we've also got a reserve matters application
we
here
can take that one
that
today.
Isn't related to any timescale matter, and all that we can't consider the principle of that because it's already been granted.
Yeah.
And we're really dealing with the access, the design of the building, and the landscaping. And unless we can find anything wrong with that, then I don't really see why we would be the justification for deferring that application.
No.
I mean, obviously up to members, but this government legislation doesn't impact on the reserve matters application. So I wonder whether we should be determining that one and deferring the outline if that's what members want.
But I, from my understanding, if members want to refuse this application after a deferment, are they not likely to vote against the reserve matters one as well?
Well, that's what I'm saying. There'd have to be a reason in terms of its access, its design, or the landscaping to refuse that application. We can't go back on the principle because that's already granted.
No.
So they are two different considerations, even though they're in the same report.
Yeah.
Maybe Shirley can provide some advice.
Yeah.
I don't think I can clarify any more from Chris Rose's comments that there are two separate applications with two separate considerations. It is for you, Chair, and the proposer and seconder of the deferment as to whether it covers both or just the one application.
Right. So, members, do we vote on both of these applications today? I'm going to propose that we defer both until more is known about the planning laws, which are changing.
Yeah, I'd second that, Eileen. I think that's right from my point of view. People might correct me, but I think it's sensible to look at the whole application together.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, obviously the change in law does not affect the outline application or reserve matters. And as such, I cannot see any reasonable excuse or reason for us to defer it unless you can come up with a good reason. And there can't be one because one doesn't exist. And that also then leads on to the outline application, because if you're permitting the reserve matters, then you have a planning application that is absolutely live and waiting for government legislation to change its mind or not change its mind, as the case may be, is irrelevant because you have a live application at fallback position anyway. You might as well deal with it now. You ain't going to change matters by deferring it all.
No, I don't think can I have a show? Oh, I can't see the hands. I'm taking an executive decision. We'll deal with them both at a deferred stage. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you don't have that authority.
Can I take a vote then? Shirley, go on.
Shall we take a roll call for the vote on to defer both matters together
Yeah.
until the next available committee.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that.
Okay, Shirley, do you just want to announce to the members exactly what they're voting on, and then I'll go through their names.
Fine. Members, we have a deferral of both the outline application and the reserved matters application until we have further information on the business and planning legislation for the extension of outline permissions and planning permissions. If you could please indicate you support the recommendation to defer, or you're against the recommendation to defer both, or abstain.
Thank you, Shirley. Councillor Bloxham.
Against the deferral.
Councillor Brown.
Against the deferral.
Councillor Chamberlain.
I support the deferral.
Councillor Davey.
Support deferral.
Councillor Desaram.
Against a deferral.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Against.
Councillor Key.
Against.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Against deferral.
Councillor Pook.
Against deferral.
Councillor Pratt.
For.
Councillor Skinner.
Sorry, support deferral.
Councillor Woodward.
Support deferral.
And Councillor Ragg.
Support deferral.
That's a joint vote, 7 for, 7 against, Chairman.
I'll use my casting vote, Chairman, as Shirley, to support deferral.
Madam Chairman, could I have a say? Is that possible?
Yeah.
What I would like to do is to pick up, as Councillor Howe quite rightly pointed out, we did talk about a deferral for a month. It may not be necessary that we have to do that once we've got past the date of the, I think it was next Monday. I believe we've got a planning meeting on next Wednesday. Am I correct in that?
Yes, yes.
And-
And we've got a further one perhaps on the 29th.
Okay, so on that basis, I don't see that we need to leave it a month. We would know the outcome of the information required, which I'm sure we all know what it's going to be anyway, but now we've gone through this process and that we do it at the first available opportunity that we have to get it onto the first agenda that we can.
Well, I suggest that we do it when the information becomes publicly known.
If I
Madam
can,
Chairman, that
gentlemen.
basis, it's Monday, is it not? That's what Chris.
Well,
Chris
at the
Pope-
meeting following that.
I think if it comes out on Monday, we should be able to update the report, and then I think we can take it to the committee on the 29th.
Yeah.
Chair, if I could just say, we've been looking at the piece of legislation today for other reasons. The suggestion is it's going back to the Lords, but there's some amendments to be made, which mean that it may be a little bit delayed. So I think the 29th is the safer date.
Thank you, Anita. And that brings our meeting to an end. I'd like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. Until then, your comments will be live to the public. Thank you.